Madam Speaker, I rise to present the budget for the year 2016-17. I am presenting this budget when the global economy is in a serious crisis. Global growth has slowed down from 3.4% in 2014 to 3.1% in 2015. Financial markets have been battered and global trade has contracted.
In this edition of Consultancy SIMSR VideoGyaan, we have with us Pankaj Trivedi sir. He with us will discuss about this budget, the budget which our Finance Minister presented on February 29th. Sir, our PM, Finance Minister, or rather the entire government during their campaigns spoke a lot about financial inclusion. What measures in this budget do you see are focused on this financial inclusion angle?
See, there are so many measures you find in this budget which are for financial inclusion in India. When one will go through the proposal of the budget, you may not find directly measures which are leading to the financial inclusion, but when the focus is on the farm sector and rural development, scheme like Prime Minister Fasal Yojana, scheme like Narega, all this will certainly lead to financial inclusion. Similarly, health measures which are taken in this budget, similarly education, particularly basic education. So these things I feel that certainly will lead to financial inclusion over a period of time.
So this budget, we have seen it's very much pro-poor, pro-rural, and at the same time we see the super rich tax and taxation on luxury products like car have gone up. So how do you evaluate this move in this budget?
If you look at the macroeconomic situation, social situation that is prevailing in the country, a country where nearly 2/3 of the population is living in rural area, a country where as high as 60% of the population are getting their income from agriculture sector. So giving more importance to agriculture sector, allocating more funds for those is always welcome. It is never a wrong step. As far as taxing the super rich is concerned, I personally feel that that is also a right step, because here we are talking about super rich. So those who are having income in crores, if they shell out little more, then they are not doing a huge sacrifice. Secondly, the other question that you have asked with respect to tax on luxury products like car. Car is a luxury product in India even today. Because real India you will not find in city like Mumbai, Delhi or Bangalore. Real India is found in the rural area. So if you take into account country as a whole, car even today is a luxurious product. So there is no harm if slightly more excise duty is imposed on the car.
In the budget we see 500 crores has been allocated for promoting entrepreneurship, especially with SC and ST sections of our society. Also they have promised to invest 1,700 crores in 1,500 multi-skill development entrepreneurship training programs. See, the intention is very clear of this government. They want to promote this Make in India and making India a startup hub kind of a vision. But also in the same background we see the success rates of startups in India is not that great. So combining these two factors, do you see this as a good move, or this might lead to evaporation of investments?
I feel it is a very good move, because another major problem our country is facing is unemployment among the youth. And the best answer and the best solution to this problem is the self-employment. So to encourage the self-employment, government has allocated huge fund for startup and skill development and all those stuff. So it's a right move. As far as the success rate is concerned, I do agree that most of the startups are not successful. But then it will also take its time. One of the reasons to my mind is lack of skill development. So in this budget and otherwise also, the policy of the government is with respect to skill development. See, unless you have commercial technical knowledge with respect to the business that you are proposing to start, naturally success rate would be lower. So if you want this success rate to go up, then first thing required is this kind of knowledge, this kind of skill. And in that direction also some of the measures we find in this budget.
Government has been very vocal about getting the black money back, and on the similar lines we see the new amnesty scheme in our budget. But schemes like this have already been introduced in previous budgets, especially we saw Chidambaram trying a bit on this. But unfortunately we haven't got success in when we came to such schemes. And we again see such kind of scheme coming back in this budget. So How will you evaluate this? How successful do you think this move can be for India?
As far as these kind of schemes are concerned where black money government is planning to take out, the success rate is bound to be little less. For simple reason that initially when the scheme is initiated, the government says that no question will be asked and simply you have to declare your black wealth and all that. But people have somewhere in their mind that fear that once they declare this, all the information about the defaulter, tax defaulter, will be with the government, and in future they may face certain consequences, etc., something like that. So this is one of the fear I think people have, and that's the reason the success rate is very low. But personally, if you ask me, with respect to these kind of scheme, I am not in favor of these kind of scheme for simple reason that it is one type of what you call what should I say? It is one kind of a biased kind of a step, because these people, those who are having a lot of black money, initially they accumulate huge wealth in this way, and then at a later stage, by paying little penalty, they come out very clean. So this is something which is not justifiable to my mind.
Not very long ago, probably 1 year back during the March session, we heard PM Modi criticize the Manrega scheme a lot. He defined that scheme as a living monument of Congress's failure. But a year later, this budget, we saw almost 40,000 crores being invested into this monumental failure. So how will you evaluate this move by this government in this budget?
See, Manrega is just one example. What happens, anything which you criticize initially, you may not be having detailed information about that scheme or detailed information about that particular thing. Once you get the information, once you study that, then you will get to know whether really it is a good move or not. So I would say that the present government that way is generous, that they are accepting that initially that they have criticized the scheme, but at a later stage they found that really this scheme is helpful to the people, particularly people below poverty line, in financial inclusion and other stuff. So instead of just criticizing for the sake of criticism, more funds are allocated and the scheme was made strengthened.
In this budget, the government of India has shown an intent saying that they want to double the income of farmers within the next 5 years. They have introduced schemes like inter-subsidiary and animal husbandry schemes, crop insurance. Again, these kind of schemes, formulas have been proposed previously by previous finance ministers, but have shown very less courage. So, what do you think is the actual intent of the government by bringing this? Is this feasible, and do you think this government would be able to get some success out of these schemes?
Certainly, I would like to say here that whether present government or earlier government, whenever they are coming out with these kind of scheme, allocation of fund for the farm sector, poor, etc., their intention is good. Whether it is a present government or earlier government. The problem in our country is with respect to distribution. The problem in our country is with respect to implementation. See, huge amount year after year is allocated for these people below poverty line. But why their situation is not improving? Somewhere we are lacking in implementation. There is a lot of leakages, and all this is required to be plugged. If you are committed to implement the scheme properly, and if you take necessary measures to plug these leakages, I think you will get the success, irrespective of the government.
We have heard a lot of problems with non-performing assets being mentioned in balance sheets of many banks. Raghuram Rajan, Arun Jaitley have spoken about this. They have been quite vocal about this. But still in this budget we see 25,000 crores allocated for recapitalization of these public sector banks. So how do you evaluate this move?
This is the area where I do some work. See, this 25,000 crores, taking into account the total requirement of capital by the banking sector, is not enough. But anyway, at least a step in that direction. One more thing I would like to say here, if you refer to the Narsimham committee report and other expert committee, view of the other expert economists and the policy makers of our country, almost everyone has that view that the public sector bank should stand on their feet. So instead of keep on helping, instead of keep on investing the funds by making budgetary allocation, if the government should focus on increasing efficiency of the bank on their own will be able to raise the required fund from the capital market, and government will also not have more budgetary burden. So I feel that whenever the banks are in need of fund, they simply approach the government and government is giving money. This practice is to be relooked at, and instead of giving money directly, focus should be given on increasing the efficiency of the bank.
One of the provisions of this budget gives around rupees 500 crores for promoting entrepreneurship with SC and ST sections of society. They also promise to build hubs to support entrepreneurship in these communities. Is this real concern by our government towards the backward and the tribal sectors, or has the Rohit Vemulla and the Kanhaiya Kumar factor played a move in this?
I don't think those factors have played the move in this, because in our country we have a lot of social issues as well, just like economic issues. So this step is also in the right direction, and I don't link that with that kind of event. In city like Mumbai, as I told you, real India is not Mumbai or other big city. We don't realize these kind of problems, but these problems are there in the interior and the countryside. So government has taken this step in the right direction.
This budget has been very much criticized with the factor that very few positives have gone in favor of middle class or the upper middle class. One of the positives which I see is a change in the section 80G regarding the deduction in the rent paid. But considering the entire scenario of this budget, would this deduction be enough for considering the middle class and the inflation rise happening in our country?
That is a very important issue. Not only this government, even the earlier government and year after year, by and large what I observed is government is ignoring middle class. So this is something where the policy maker need to give attention. In the present budget also, whatever benefits that is given in the form of some concession in the rent and other minor concession, that is not at all enough. The reason is very simple. The income of the middle class is not increasing the rate at which there is increase in expenditure. See, all these figures that we always talk about, consumer price index and wholesale price index. But actually when the middle class person goes to the market to buy his daily requirement or daily necessities, he has to shell out large amount of money. So taking into account inflation factor, taking into account other factors, benefit has to be given to the middle class, which is ignored year after year by all the government.
The service rate has gone from 19.33 in 2014 to 15% this year. Is the Modi government unknowingly hurting the pockets of the middle class and the upper middle class, which I believe were the early vote banks of Modi? Or is this a conscious move?
See, as far as the service tax in India is concerned, it is one of the important source of revenue for the government, because a country where as I guess 60% of the GDP is coming from service sector, you can't ignore that sector from the tax point of view. But the tendency of increasing the service tax whenever the government is in need of money is to be relooked at. Because now the government has understood that this is something where people can't avoid the tax. Tax avoidance is not possible in case of indirect tax. You can't avoid the tax. And that's the reason this is a very easy move for the government to raise the revenue. So I think that is to be looked at, certainly.
So this would certainly be my favorite question in this interview.
Please.
How much has the UP factor influenced this budget? Can we say this budget is very much pro-poor, or has it been a pro-UP budget made?
Economics and politics, these are the two things which you can't separate. Many times it happens that economic decisions are taken into account political considerations. And this is not something which is very unique to India. It is across the world. These two things you can't separate. Only thing is, whenever government is taking any economic decision, it should not be totally focusing on the political factor. Because in the past, even this also I have noticed that certain policies were decided purely taking into account, political factor. So, somewhere that also is having a shadow in this budget. That shadow is also there. But at the end, certainly I will say that focus on the rural sector as well as the agriculture sector is a good move. The biggest plus is emphasis on farm sector, rural development and education sector. For the first time, something new I have noticed, that government is serious in terms of education sector also. For the first time I am noticing that government is serious with respect to what you call animal resources, cattle resources of our country. If I am talking about particularly in farm sector, otherwise always we talk about fertilizers and power and all that, because that is one of the area which can be tapped and the government has made some move in that direction. So that according to me is a good move. Maintaining fiscal discipline is another best thing what I have observed in this budget. And as far as the negatives are concerned, ignoring middle class is one of the main limitation of this budget according to me. The government should consider middle class also while drafting the proposal. That is what my firm and a very, very strong belief.